Hello everybody, and welcome to Getting Started with OpenText Analytics Designer. Today we will cover the OpenText Analytics architecture. We will then do an overview of the Analytics Designer, and we will then step into building your first reports. OpenText Analytics provides solutions for all your analytical and reporting needs. Let's take a look at the OpenText Analytics architecture. Let's start with being broken into three main areas: design, deploy, and display. If we look at the deploy area, we see the OpenText Information Hub, iHub for short. This is an enterprise-grade deployment server for secure, interactive analytic applications and is the foundation for standalone and embedded application in the OpenText Analytics product stack. iHub brings information designs to life, making them interactive, personalized, and trackable. The web tier allows you to display your content. Our APIs make it easy to embed visualizations in any application or device. In design, we have OpenText Big Data Analytics, which is an advanced analytics software solution designed to access, blend, explore, and analyze data. Also in the design area, we have the Analytics Designer, which is used to create content for iHub and set up access to any data store. This is what we will focus on today. If you have not downloaded the Designer, you can go to the following URL to download our free Analytics Designer. The Designer is a modern integrated development environment based upon Eclipse. It provides tools that you can use to build and customize report designs and dashboards. It allows for previewing and debugging. When you first start the Designer, it will ask for a workspace. You can take the default or create a new workspace. If this is the first time you're running the Designer, you will get a welcome screen. Just click on the Create BERT Designs. It will now ask you if you want to create a BERT project. So we will give it a name and then select blank or report project. You can always select cancel if you don't want to create a new project at this time. Let's take a look at the different areas of the Analytics Designer. So inside the Designer, we have a blank report here, and we can see we're on the layout page. The layout page is where you'll be putting your different tools that you want to use, tables, visualizations, and other things inside the report. We also have a master page. This is very good for multi-page reports when you want to have a common header and footer for all the pages. The script page allows me to write custom script code to the different events I have available to me to control output or manipulate the data inside the report. If I'd like to view just the raw source code, I can do that. It's all XML, but I can actually see it if I ever decide I wanted to look at how things are done. Back in the layout, we can see we have a property editor. This is where we'll see the properties for the different controls we might put on the report, a table, a chart, or visualization that we can set different pieces of it, such as the fonts, the colors, or other different pieces that we want to set for inside the different properties. We also have the ability to look at problems that might arise and error logs, and then very important is the Server Explorer. This allows me to connect to iHub. When I'm connected to iHub, I can either with one click deploy my whole project out onto iHub for others to be able to utilize and view, or I can also bring the data back in. Maybe there's a change request and I need to modify a report. Well, I can actually, right inside the Designer, go to that iHub, select that report, and download it back into the Designer to make those changes to that. If we look up over here at the top left, that's the Pallet area. This is where we have all the different controls that you can use for placing inside your report. We have the Data Explorer. This is where you're going to connect to your data sources, write your queries, and work with the data in other different ways and manipulate it. The Resource Explorer is a great place to look for shared resources that you might have put into your project that you want to use, such as maybe a library. Down below, you'll see we have the Navigator. This is just a place to navigate through your projects to be able to get to the different reports and other files inside your project that you want to work on. We also have the outline view. The outline view is for a specific individual file and allows me to quickly navigate around inside that file. So let's go ahead and create our very first report. Well, the first thing you have to do is set up a data source. So we'll just quickly say I want a new data source. And you can see out of the box we provide a wide range of data sources for you to use. Cloud sources such as Amazon RDS, NoSQL such as Cloudera, and MongoDB. We have scripted data sources, web services that you can use, flat files. In this case, I'm just going to choose our classic models sample database. This ships with the designer and also ships with iHub. So if you're creating samples that you want to see how they deploy onto iHub, you know that they'll work because we have that sample database as part of iHub also. So we'll just choose Next to create that data source. Say Finish, and now we want to create the data set. So we'll say I want a new data set, and we'll just take the default name and say Next, and we can actually see there's all the tables from that data source. And if we click on it, we can see it expands out, and we can actually see the table and all the columns in there. In this case, I'm just going to do a select star from employees. So I can drag and drop employees and just type in select star, say Finish. I now get my edit data set dialog where I can work with the data and do different things such as add computed columns if I wanted to. So a lot of ways to work with the data or adjust the query if I need to. So here I can actually go to preview results to make sure my query was correct, and there's all the data available to me to look at and see that my query ran successfully. So now I can say OK, and I have a data set. Well, it's very simple to make a report with this. It's just drag and drop. So I drop that on to the report, say I'd like to select all the columns, say OK, and that drops it right onto the report. I have a couple things I want to show you that I can quickly set on how this displays and works with the end user. Inside the report, I can quickly say what type of layout preference I want. Do I want auto layout, which means that I get some form of responsive design here, because as I change the size of the browser, the columns can resize. This is great if people are going to be viewing it in a browser or maybe different types of devices. Fixed layout is really great if I want to print that report or export it to PDF or Word document, and I want that pixel perfect reporting. I can choose fixed layout. So what about my table? What happens if I want to change the formatting of the table, change some of the colors, the fonts, things like that? Well, I can go through and adjust everything individually, but that's a lot of work. So we provide the ability to have themes. So if I use a theme, I can set all that up in advance in the theme, and then I can just select that theme, and we can see it just changes everything inside the table to match the fonts and the color schemes of that theme. So it's very quick and easy to do that. And if I need to change something, I can just change it in the theme, and then I can just refresh it and have my report update that way. So now my report's all done. In a matter of a couple minutes, I've connected to data source, created a report, and formatted it the way I want. So now I'm ready to just save it and run it. And when we run it, you don't just get it in a little preview pane. We actually bring it up in a browser. So we can work with that the same way the end user would work with it. And the end user has a lot of power. Instead of just viewing this as a static report, they can go in and enable interactivity. This puts power in the hands of the end user. So for example, I can quickly sort this. So now if I want to filter this, I can quickly go ahead and just select filter, and then select the value I want to filter. So I can just select a value to see everybody that reports to this employee number, and then I say OK, and just like that, I filtered my report. Very quick and easy, and puts a lot of power into the hands of the end user. Now let's go ahead and create a little bit more of an advanced report here. So we'll just go ahead and say File, New Report. And in this case, we'll give it a user-friendly name. So we're going to call this Sales Summary by Product Line, choose Next. You can see we provide a lot of templates out of the box that you can use to create your reports with. You also have the ability in the design to create your own custom templates and add those to the list also. So we'll just say Finish and take the blank report. Inside this blank report, the first thing we want to do is go ahead and let's change the property for layout to fixed layout so we can have a report that will print very nicely. So now that we've done that, we're going to go ahead and set a data source. And we're going to go ahead and use the sample data classic models again. So I've set up my data source. So now I'm going to create a data set, but I've already have my query written, so we can quickly move through that. So I'm just going to quickly open my text file that has my query, and then we'll copy that over and paste it into the query when we create our data set. And we'll go back to our report. And now we'll set up a new data set. And we're going to give this a friendly name too. And choose next. And this takes us into the query designer. In this case, remember, we just copied that query, so we're just going to paste it in. And where we can look at this. And we see that we have 2 question marks as part of the query. So those are parameters. So we're going to be able to set those up so when the user runs this report, they can select the start date and the end date for the data that's in the report. If we also look, we see we're using this equals sum statement, so we can actually pass some of the processing down to the actual data source and let it do the work for us instead of us bringing back the raw data and then having to sum it once we pull it back. So thereby passing that work down to the data source. So we'll just select finish. And now, remember, we had those 2 parameters, so we can set those right up from inside the edit dataset dialog. So we'll choose parameters, and there they are. So we'll just select the first one and choose edit, and we're going to call this start date. It knows it's a date, but we'd like to link this to a report parameter. So I can click these little brackets here, and it will bring up the dialog box for a new report parameter. We're going to give it the same name. It knows it's a date time, but I'd like to format this. So I can quickly choose that I'd like to format this. It provides me the different formats. We'll choose medium date here and say OK. So now we have that formatted, and I want to give a static value, a value just to start with, so the user can still change this, but it makes it much simpler if I have a date here to begin with. So now I've given it a starting date. We'll say OK. And we'll go ahead and create the end date now. So we'll just click edit again and give this the name end date. Click the little brackets again to create a new report parameter. And we'll set the formatting for this also. In this case, for the end date, what I'd like to display is the current date. So we can easily do this by selecting JavaScript. Now, I can type it in if I know what it is, but what happens if I can't quite remember the function that provides me the current date? Well, I can select native JavaScript functions. I can go to the category of date, and there it is right there for me. And I can just click on that and add that in. Just by double clicking, I've added that in, the statement, and I didn't even have to write a line of code. And say OK. I now have the availability to, when I run this, it will grab the current date from the system and populate that into the parameter. So I can say OK. So now I've set up my 2 parameters, and I can test to make sure that they actually work. So I can check preview results, and we'll see that it runs a query and I get my results back. So I know everything's working and I'm ready to build my report now. So I'll say OK, and now we'll do like we did before. We'll just drag and drop that over and drop that in. I'm going to say select all and say OK, and that will build a table with those 3 columns there. But the other thing I'd like to do is I want to add more data to this report. I want a column that shows profit and profit margins. Well, that's simple and easy to do. I can just say that I'd like to insert a column to the right, and I can just do that twice and insert 2 new columns. So I've got my 2 new columns. I'm ready to start working on this. So I'll just say, a couple different things here would like to do first is I want to set up and make these labels a little bit more readable. So let's put them in more proper case. And we'll change these 3 that we have. So now we've changed the ones that came in, and now I want to add labels for the 2 new columns. So it's very quickly, I just go to my palette, drag and drop the label, and give it the name I want. So this will be my profit column. So I'll just repeat that process, drag and drop a label, and we're going to call this profit margin. So now I want to be able to display the data for that. Well, we didn't pull that data over, so where am I going to get that data from? I'm going to create it sort of on the fly in essence. So we'll just take a data field and drop that in. So it allows me to create my own data binding field. In this case, we'll call it profit. And this is going to be a float. And I can use an expression to create that data field with. So I'm going to go to my available column bindings. These are data that's already there, and I note that to get this I'm going to take revenue minus cost and say OK, and just like that I've got myself a new data column for the profit. So I need to do the same thing for profit margin. So I'll drag and drop a data field into here, and we'll give it the proper name, profit margin. This also will be a float, and we're going to create a quick JavaScript expression. So I'm going to select available column bindings from the table, and this is going to be profit divided by revenue. So there's the profit column. We just add it. They're available for me to use. So I can say profit divided by revenue by just double clicking those. It puts them in. I don't even have to type. Say OK, and now I've created that new column for myself to use. In the footer area, I'd like to put some totals. So the first thing I'll do is just quickly drag and drop a label, give it the name total, and then I know for like revenue here, I already have the revenue. I've summed that, but I'd like an aggregation of that. So I can quickly, from the quick tools, just drag and drop aggregation, and we'll give that aggregation a name and call it total revenue. And it's going to be a float. The functions, we have a lot of built-in functions to start with. I'm just going to say sum. I'd like this to be sum, and I want it from the revenue line. And you can see I'm going to aggregate at the table level. If I was doing a report that had different groups in, I could also aggregate at the group level. So we'll say OK, and then we'll repeat the step for cost. Call this one total cost. Select sum. Select cost. And say OK, and now I've got my total cost. So what do I do for profit and profit margin? Well, I can't really aggregate those because those are calculations. So I take the data field again, drag and drop that in there. We'll give it the name, total profit. We know it's a float. And now we'll quickly go create my expression from the column bindings again. So if I look in the column bindings, there's those aggregations that I had. I have total revenue, and I can minus that from total cost. So I have my total profit. And I can just repeat that step for profit margin. So I'll take the data field, Drag and drop that in there and give it a name of total profit margin. And if we look here, we can see right now we have the same name as the previous field. And we're smart enough to let you know that, hey, this name already exists. So it makes it a lot easier for me, the developer, to know that, oops, I might have a duplicate name here. So we'll go ahead and create this as a float. We need the expression, so we'll take the column bindings, and we know that this is total profit. So we can see there's the total profit field I added, and this is divided from total revenue. So just like that, I've created those totals at the bottom for myself. A couple things I'd like to do from a formatting aspect is I'd like all my numbers to be right justified. Well, I don't want to go to every column and every field here and do that. That takes a long time and is a lot of work. Well, I can just go ahead and select all of them. I can select the first one and hold down the control key and select all the controls I'm interested in setting to be right justified. Once I do that, I can look at the properties, and I'm only going to show properties that are available for me to set. So I can look and set this and say I want to right justify them all. So with one click, after selecting them all, I've right justified all of those. The next thing I want to do is for revenue, cost, and profit, I'd like to set those to display as currency. Well, I can just quickly deselect on the column for profit margin. So I can hold the control key, select profit margin, total profit margin, and those have been deselected. And now I can go into format numbers for the 6 that are left selected and choose currency and add in that I'd like the thousand separator. So just like that, I've done those. So profit margin column is a little different. I'd like that to show as percent. So I can go back in, select, and hold the control key to select both of those. And in format number, I'll just go ahead and select that to be percent. So just like that, I've set all those up. So one other thing I'd like to do for profit margin is use a little bit of conditional formatting. So I can select profit margin, go to highlights in the property editor, and choose add. And this is going to be profit margin. And you can see I have a lot of different values I can choose from as far as, the type of condition I want. So in this case, I'm going to choose less than and say 0.38. And I can choose some stock colors, or I can also go into the color picker and choose whatever color I want or create a custom color. In this case, I'm just going to take red and say OK. And I'm going to go ahead and add a second condition. So we take the same thing, profit margin, but in this case we're going to say greater than 0.40, and we're going to change that color to a green. Say OK. So just like that, without writing any code or doing anything, I've now added some conditional highlighting. A couple of things I want to do to make this report look really nice for folks that are looking at it is I'd like to add a title to it and also add a chart to it. So to do that, we're going to just go to the table, and we're just going to add a couple extra columns into the header area. So we're going to insert a row above and repeat that process. So now I have my 2 extra rows. Well, in these top 2 rows, I don't want columns in those like I have here, the 5 columns. I just want them to be single column rows. Well, that's very simple to do. I select the first row, first column in the first row, hold the shift key down, select the last column, then right click and just choose merge cells. I can do the same thing for the second row. Now I've merged all those cells, so nice and easy. But before I go any further, the other thing I like to do to this table is give it some nice formatting. So I can go back over to my properties here, and we can see that we have the theme area here. But what I'd like to do is use a custom library so it matches my corporate guidelines for the colors and the fonts and other things that we want in all reports. So I can just quickly select that from my Resource Explorer and say Use Library. Now when I go to themes, I'll see the stock ones that we ship with, but also here's this new training table theme in the online training library. So I can select I want the training table theme. We see everything changes very quick and easy. So now my table has the correct theme, so I have the correct colors and fonts that I want. So what I want to do now is go ahead and add the title. So we'll add a label. And we'll give the label the name of the sales of the report. And when we come off of that, we'll see that that label goes ahead and automatically matches to the theme with the font and the color scheme. So where I want my chart to go, I'd like this column to be 3 inches. So I don't have to guess with that. I can actually set that by quickly going to the outline view. And I can go to that row and I can set the height very quickly and easily as part of a property here. So now I've set that, and we'll actually see that that changes to be 3 inches. One other thing I'd like to do is change the background of that cell. So I can use the outline to find it, quickly find it and select it. I want to override the color scheme from the theme because my chart's going there. I'd like that just to be a white background. So I can quickly change that and override that. So we'll quickly tell you that I'd like that to be white. There it is. So now let's put our chart in. So I can just go down. So I can just go down to chart and drag and drop that in. So here's my chart, and we can see out of the box the default format's HTML5. That means that will work cross-browser, cross-platform, anything that supports HTML5. I want to select my data. So I'm going to inherit the data from the container because I don't want a different query for this. I want to use the same data that's in my container to show. So very quickly I can say for the X series, I want product line. For my series 1 on the Y series, I'd like revenue. And I'd like to have a second series on here. So that's just as simple as saying I'd like a new series and selecting the data. In this case, we'll choose cost. Very quick, very easy to do. So now let's go do some formatting on this chart. Well, the first thing I want to do is change the theme to match the color schemes of my table. So I'm going to say I have a training chart theme. So we'll choose that to get the same color as that we have for the table, all within inside the theme. I think I'd like to turn shadowing off, so I'll just click that and turn it off. And when I go to title, I don't need a title for the chart also because I have a title on the report. So I'm just going to turn the title off. And the next thing I want to do is I look at the series and it says Series 1, Series 2. Well, that's not very good. People don't know what that means. So we'll go ahead and set the titles to those to be more meaningful. To revenue and cost. So just like that, I've created my report. I can say finish, and we'll actually see it'll put the report in there and size it to the size of the container it's in. So now my report's all done. And I'm almost ready to test, but then I remember one last thing. When people are looking at the product line, they want to be able to then click on that and drill down into detailed sales information for that product line. So I've already got a report created and developed that does the detailed sales on a specific product line, sales by product. So how do I get the user to that and pass them the information where they're currently at from this report? Well, I can do a drill through. So I can select product line. I can then go down in my properties to hyperlink, edit that, and in this case I'm going to choose drill through. I'll go select that report that I have available to me, and it's sales by product line. Say OK, and I know that takes some parameters. I don't have to guess at what they are or the type values that they go into. It'll show me. I can just click add, and it goes looks at that report and says, hey, your first parameter is the product line. What would you like to pass it? Well, I can go into my expression builder, and I can choose column bindings and say just pass it the product line. Whatever product line the user is clicking at, pass that value in as the product line. So I can just say OK there and pass that in. So I know I have another parameter in here. So I'll click add, and it says start date. Well, I've already got that from the initial report. So I can go in here and say I want to take the start date report parameter that's in my initial report and pass that on. So we just double click and move that on. And we can do the same thing for the last one, which is end date. And we'll just double click end date and move that on. So now I'm all through. In just a couple minutes, I've built up a complete report with table, formatting, some aggregations in there, put a chart in there, and format it and set up a drill through. So now we're all ready to save and run this. So let's go ahead and save it and quickly run this. And we get to see it as the end user would see it. So there's the parameters. I'll just click finish without changing the values. It'll run the report. There's my report. Now remember, the end user gets to work with this through interactivity. So I can say enable interactivity, and if I go into profit margin and I sort that, we can see that the chart updates when the sort order changes. So let's show that again. We've now sorted this with the highest profit margin on the top, and we see the chart matches that, with motorcycles being first. So I'd like to know, well, what are the sales of motorcycles that's driving my high profit margin? So I can click that, and we drill in to that detailed report, which is the sales by product line. And now we can see all the sales for the motorcycle product line inside this report. So just like that, we very easily covered how to quickly build a report, do some conditional formatting, and do a drill through, all very fast and very easy inside the OpenText Analytics Designer. So I'd like to thank everybody for watching, and for more information, please visit opentext.com. Thank you very much.